Welcome to the Portland Interior Designer Spotlight Series, featuring in-depth interviews with some of Portland's most influential and innovative interior designers. These public conversations, sponsored by Ceilume and PortlandArchitecture.com, are a nexus for Portland's vibrant design community, an opportunity for casual networking, and the perfect place to hear about the next big thing in Portland design. Now, please join us at Ceilume's beautiful ceiling showroom in the heart of Portland's East Side Industrial District for Portland Interior Designer Spotlight.
Tonight, we've got the folks from FIELDWORK. FIELDWORK is a design studio and fabrication workshop that has a lot going on under one roof. They specialize in architecture, interior design, furniture, and industrial design, as well as fabrication. They were founded in 2011. Architects Cornell Anderson and Timothy Fouch, and interior designer Tonia Hein. Their current and past client list is really impressive and includes Tender Loving Empire, Nike, Catlin Gable Schools, Keen Footwear, and a whole bunch of others that I wasn't going to rattle off. Leading the discussion is noted architecture writer and founder of PortlandArchitecture.com, Brian Libby. Brian's work appears in the New York Times, Metropolis, Dwell, Architect Magazine, and his blog, Portland Architecture, is Portland's prominent resource for coverage of projects and issues encompassing the regional design community.
We really appreciate your coming tonight, and we appreciate Ceilume for hosting us. And this is the third in a kind of bi-monthly series, and I recognize a couple of familiar faces, so thanks to those of you who are back again for more. There didn't used to be architects, that there were just master builders, and then eventually those aspects of the profession became divided, and then became different professions, and today in some ways it would be an oversimplification, but I think there's a kernel of truth to the fact that in some ways those lines are becoming blurred, and some of those disciplines are coming back together again. There are a lot of firms that I'm noticing, around the country today that are kind of combining, these different aspects of design that can become siloed in certain firms and are very much not here. And so we have the three partners from FIELDWORK, two architects and one interior designer. And so, there are a couple of different ways in which they kind of blur lines and both in terms of their professional training and also this kind of union of design and fabrication. So thanks to all three of you for coming tonight. So maybe we could get into the formation of your firm and whether it's one or all of you, whoever wants to weigh in. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about, this sort of, whether it's as a business opportunity or the chance to be creative in a way that suited you. I wonder if you could talk about kind of some of the mindset you had getting to know each other and deciding to form a firm, and that decision and what you felt like you could sort of brand yourself as, or the kind of combination of skills that you could bring to the table.
I think that it's complicated because these things are always a mix of both opportunity of the time that we were in, which was in kind of this intense recession that we all, I'm sure, remember very well, but also you need a little bit of almost a naive excitement about forming your own way, and I think we all were at a point of departure in our careers where we felt like we were ready for a transformative time, be it to kind of cement ourselves into the career path we were in or look at something different. And I think we're all feeling like there was an opportunity here to start to work with your friends rather than for just an organization that you were a part of. So I think that felt attractive to us. I don't know that there was any sort of like grand vision that we all coalesced around. I think it was more just an impulse of an excitement that seemed like it was a good opportunity and something we should pursue and find out where it took us.
And like when I visit your firm, I remember walking around with you, and kind of the space where you have your desks is almost like a little more than half the square footage, and you've got this shop, and people are making things, and there's saws going off and routers and so forth. So was that the intent from the beginning, or how did that happen?
Yeah, we all have some sort of making in our background, and we've all worked at kind of larger firms in town or in the East Coast, and we sort of regretted seeing the making so removed from the designing. and we wanted to try to bring those two together. I think, like Tim mentioned, part of it was sprung from the recession, and we were working on projects. I think Team Footwear was one of the first ones, and we had designed some workstations, and it was sort of like, well, why don't we just build them? We have that capacity and that ability. And then we continue to design through the making, and we just realized that we could produce better design by combining the two.
And what do you think of this idea of, I feel like this word making is something I hear more often now, and I feel like there are more interesting people with design backgrounds who seem to be manufacturing, and I wondered, are you aware of this, or do you think that's the case, and is there anything about like the technology, the equipment that changed, or what's kind of behind this, everybody talking about making today? Or is there a kind of thing we were lacking, by being, maybe it was that we were so removed from it?
I think it's a couple things. One is that I think it's almost counterintuitive, but there's this sophistication about design that's happened in the past 10 years or so, where I think people have a higher level of expectation and also a higher level of interest in the design that's going on around them. So I think as designers, you're then put in a position where you really want to protect that idea, and in a sense it could be you're controlling it or something, but on the other hand, you're setting out to protect something that you feel is valuable to not just yourself, but to clients and or the public or whatever. So I think when you have to hand things off, there's this, a lot of times, loss that happens where you don't see your vision realized in some sense, and there's a sacrifice made. So I think that interest in making is both this yearning to kind of return to something a little more honest, but also just in the fact that the idea is protected so much further into the process. And it's more personal too, which is wonderful.
And I would think, Tonia, this, as an interior designer, it gives you kind of a bigger toolbox in a certain respect. I mean, obviously, part of what as I caught myself there in a certain respect saying, referring to you as if you're the interior designer and you're the architects, and there's a lot more blurred lines than that. But, given your interior design background, do you feel like, the tools that you have for custom manufacturing or custom making things is kind of an exciting frontier for a designer?
Yeah, I mean, for instance, like if we're working on a project, working on details, or you're starting to look at different materials, how you may treat them, versus, working with a shop and sending it out and 2 to 4 weeks later, potentially seeing a prototype. We can literally start seeing prototypes within that same day. So that is just really exciting as a designer to see your vision, like your ideas come to life in a matter of hours sometimes. Right. So I think that's what is the most satisfying portion of having that kind of making in the shop. Associated with the design studio.
And how would you all describe your process?
I currently, it's been very different depending on the client. We'll have some clients truly coming to us for architecture, some for interior design, some for truly just fabrication or custom furniture. But what starts to happen through that evolution and through the process of the project, whether it's from architecture, well then slowly now we've incorporated all the interior design services into that, all the way down to custom fabrication, whether we're designing custom architectural panels or screens, furniture to help support that project. So it's constantly evolving. So I think that's what's actually really exciting, is that every project that comes into the office, we never really know which direction and which path it's going to take. So I think that's what's really interesting as far as being on the other side and helping to kind of help guide that project.
Yeah, and it sounds like you've sort of put yourselves in a position to have flexibility that way. It reminds me that just in a general sense, one of the things I love about design is this kind of push-pull that always exists between sort of creativity versus, real world issues, whether it's budget or other kinds of constraints.
And having the shop associated with the studio, as far as like the flexibility, whether it comes down to project deadlines, or meeting a budget, then we can quickly reevaluate how we're actually going to execute that in order to continue to meet, the project's deadlines. And that's happened often on projects as well, where typically you wouldn't really have control of that situation.
Yeah, I mean, every project is some combination of sort of pure architecture interiors and then the fabrication side to varying degrees. It's also kind of dependent on who our team is, who the contractor is. And sometimes we go into it with contractors that we've worked with, and so they know what to expect from us and we know what to expect from them. Sometimes it's sort of a arranged marriage, and it's a contractor, we've maybe worked with for the first time. So, and then sometimes they kind of discover what we can do and they'll lean on us a little more, and so we may end up doing more fabrication. We can kind of come in and help almost last minute to, I think like Tim was saying, protect the idea and the quality of it if it's looking like they need our assistance.
And I would think also, I've sort of approached the flexibility you have from the perspective of creativity, but I would think also, especially given that this was a firm that was born from the recession, it would also give you more capabilities. Like if it's a time where the economy downturns, you can be doing an interior design project, you can be doing an architecture project, or you can be making custom furniture, or you can also start to explore, as I seem to recall you had said, is maybe a future avenue to kind of make and sell furniture, for example. So I would think just as a business, it helps as well.
I think that's right. I think architecture obviously had quite an awakening during the recession as far as kind of it was a jarring experience, I think, for the profession and for a lot of people in the profession. I think we lost a lot of people that went to other careers. Sometimes that's healthy, sometimes it hurts, maybe it's a mix of both, but I think we had a feeling that it does make sense to have the profession have a little bit more of a kind of three-legged stool, so that you're serving more than one function. So
right.
If large projects go away, there's small projects, or there's interiors, or there's furniture, that kind of thing. But it was easy to blame the recession, I think, in a sense, but I think we also were thinking that perhaps that's also a sign of some ailment that had kind of happened to the profession, and that it had become very meeting focused, very bureaucratic, very administrative, as opposed to really a creative, fundamentally a building exercise, which you mentioned early on. So I think that was part of that. Sometimes it's not even clear, but I think that was the impulse we were feeling, is like we wanted to close the circle a little bit.
Yeah, I wrote down Nike as one of your clients that might be worth talking about, because if I'm not mistaken, this is a client for whom you've done different scales of design work, and there's a beautiful branding wall that is part of that slideshow that kind of renders the Nike logo in nothing but wood. So whether it's starting with that branding wall, or maybe you could just sort of walk us through your relationship with them as it evolved.
It's complicated.
So I would say probably it has truly evolved working with them. In the very beginning, I believe we were working kind of on more custom furniture, working on even what they call rig rooms, so kind of building out conference room, display rooms for different product designers. And then that led to, once obviously everybody, I'm sure, is aware of the campus expansion. So part of that whole process was when they would go into these kind of just typical, tilt-up concrete construction buildings, they were really wanting to make the interior kind of a statement that you've arrived. And so that's when they approached us on kind of creating this potential branded wall, or this wall that could maybe be re-seen in several buildings, whether that happens at a stair element, happens at the lobby wall, reception desk. So we did several different studies. And so what we were really into looking at it, being more architectural versus just another graphic or vinyl application that felt very temporary, something that really became just very textural. And so that's kind of when we started to explore the branded wall. The design team at Nike was looking at salvaged gymnasium flooring and what do we do with that? And so typically you usually see it kind of laid up, so you'll expose kind of the gym patterns. You'll see that as part of the design. We started looking at different studies. Well, what if we turn it actually vertically and on its end, looking at the groove side, the tongue side. And so we ended up looking at the tongue side of it, and we didn't even, and through different iterations, we looked at, okay, do we clean it up? Because obviously it's been in a gymnasium for, who knows, 20 years. So you'll start to literally see gum, popcorn shells, and part of the beauty, we ended up actually just leaving that. So when you're standing back and looking at these walls, that really becomes kind of this textural element that's added to the walls as well.
A kind of patina in a way.
Yes, exactly, yeah.
And the prototyping gave us the ability to look at, spacing. I mean, we looked at it like, I think this is an inch.
And 3/4.
What does it look like an inch and a
7/8,
half
yeah.
or close? And then we could rapidly do that in our shop instead of having to draw it up on AutoCAD, send it out to a fabricator.
Right.
It was immediate feedback.
Yeah. And that makes me think of another project of yours that I wanted to mention for this software app company, I believe is called Be Funky. Of course, I sound so exceptionally white when I say that, but when we looked at, it's like if you could be looking at just kind of the wall of a conference room, and there's a kind of design language there, and you look at these custom desks that have all this beautiful wood, but some use of metal as a kind of dividing factor and stuff, and it's all very simple, but it just has a kind of simple elegance, and just as you're saying, it all feels kind of one thing. So I wonder if any of you could talk a little bit about what you were hearing from them, and a little bit about that design process, and maybe does it say anything about kind of what Fieldwork does?
So I think when meeting with the client on that particular project, they were looking to kind of set themselves apart from the typical kind of high-tech company with more trend, color, heavily branded environment, and looking at more of a timeless environment, looking at, quality materials, really building like, a desk that's not just a hoteling station, but it goes back to like, almost a mid-century style, which is where we drew some inspiration from. But everything was solid white oak, and it has this essence to it when you're there that it just feels very grounded and you are at home. And it's been interesting getting feedback from the client because, we kind of created some different areas for breakout areas, and what we've been told is everyone just stays at their desk because it's this amazing kind of place for them to work, and that's where they feel most comfortable in the space.
Another project I believe you're working on now that's coming up is the store Tender Loving Empire. And if y'all haven't been to this store, they have a downtown version now, and it's a record company and it's a shop, and it just feels very Portland. And so I wonder if you could tell us about that project as well.
Yeah, Tender Loving Empire is a company, but really they're just an amazing group of people that I think are quite visionary and quite optimistic in spirit and in the way they run their organization. It's been, I think, great to work with them because they're not big, their budgets are very important to them to maintain to the health of their business, but they're in a place of growth where they're coming from this very, I think, the early Portland DIY aesthetic where things are cobbled together in an imaginative way, and it really becomes exciting, and it's part of this amazing swirling energy that was going on. And now it seems like Portland is kind of getting this level of sophistication about it. So how do you move past DIY in not a jarring way so that it no longer feels like home, but start to elevate that aesthetic a little bit? Still comfortable, still approachable, but just slowly start to align DIY with actually a little bit more of a sophisticated organization that's no longer really DIY because they've grown out of that. Now they have to kind of pay attention, know
Right.
what they're doing to maintain this beautiful thing they've created. So,
Right.
so our architecture and interiors and furniture was really just to help support all of that. So I think we took some notes from their branding, again, some of the 2D stuff they did early on, because of course web presence is often leading a lot of this stuff. And started to just take small notes and begin to build the music that becomes the spatial world that we're in from that.
Right.
But not too one for one, you know, it's not just about applying graphics everywhere. So.
Yeah.
But they've been great and really a fun client. And now, yeah, we're doing another store on Northwest 23rd right now.
That's great.
So, and talk about constraints today, we're doing some demo and we found that the concrete floor we'd all been counting on being beautiful is covered in an orange and yellow diagonal checkerboard pattern. So, yeah. But sometimes those things are those are the opportunities where I think what it will bring to the project is, so now we're gonna have to take a little more time to clean up the floor. That means we can spend a little more time on some of the things that are going in parallel, such as the build out and some of the other details. So you take those, you know, when you're knit tightly into the actual build of a space, you can actually make more of those opportunities.
Yeah, yeah, and I feel like even if you're not working always in older buildings, there's something about maybe the conversation we were having about this wood and the sort of patina-like quality. It seems like you know, renovation can be a particular type of opportunity because there's a kind of, you know, aged materiality that you can work with, and yet everybody who works in historic preservation knows that, you know, you got to be kind of ready for surprises as well. So, you know, it's a bit of a double-edged sword, I guess, in that way. I wanted to ask also about a project that really is not interior design at all, but it was the first project I saw by Fieldwork that really caught my attention, and it was just a tractor shed. And, you know, I almost felt like I could start this talk by sort of saying to the audience, like, when is a tractor shed not a tractor shed? You know, that it was, I love this tractor shed. It somehow at once is completely unpretentious and is a tractor shed, and it's made out of the materials, and it has the basic form of a, you know, a traditional agrarian barn, and yet there's a little bit of like Mies van der Rohe in this or something. You know, it has a crispness and a kind of simple elegance, and so you know, I wondered, you know, if that was your intent all along or what you saw. You know, it seems like it's a little bit different from the type of project you normally do, but you really were able to run with it and make it your own and make it something that even people who don't care about barns or agrarian architecture really stopped and took notice of.
Yeah, our work is definitely grounded in a certain process of how we approach it. So, I mean, we kind of embrace new project types, and none of us had done a tractor shed before. It was a very, I would say, sophisticated client, but we began by looking at the Hood River Valley region and looking at some of the barns that were there, and it didn't have sort of some of the older barns that you see in the Willamette Valley that were made out of wood. It's actually just a lot of very simple, like Butler buildings, you know, metal prefab type buildings. So we kind of departed from that and tried to elevate it. And it really boiled down to the detail. So the critical detail on that one is the roof panel folds into the wall panel, and is just not something that most contractors and fabricators are used to building, but we worked with them and kind of mocked it up, and we were able to pull that detail off. And then I think to hopefully give it some of that Miesian, you know, precision.
Yeah, it seems like, you know, when modern architecture originally began, it was sort of stripping down these types of traditional architecture with gargoyles and all that sort of thing. And it seems like in some of the firms like your own, and I think of another architect I really am a fan of in town, Ben Wechter, it's this finding a way to take kind of some of the traditional ways in which simple things like a window or a roof or a facade are done, and just kind of tie them down a little cleaner and tighter, and it can go a long way. You know, I think of a house that Ben Wechter did that was using corrugated metal, kind of a pretty humble material, and he just simply made the decision to kind of wrap it around the corners of his building instead of having it fastened down with, you know, some kind of other, you know, type of metal there, and it just sort of made it, you know, made the whole thing sing, you know, just through that simple decision. So it seems like, you know, that's what part of what you're looking for too, is to kind of not just, you know, what can we not just what can we add, but what can we kind of take away.
I mean, I think we're always pushing each other to cut more, which, you know, at a certain point, it's you make it hard because you're kind of going out of the normal sets of details. But in another sense, we found that brings sometimes a level of excitement to the project. Like the metal fab crew is actually like, cool, yeah, we'll try that. Because we actually figured they're going to stomp this into the ground and say no, and that'll be the end of that idea.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, you kind of talk to people about why it's important and what you're trying to do, and a lot of times people are excited to try something that's outside of their daily practice. So that was fun. And it was grounded in a certain architectural logic, and that shed was so simple in both concept but in program and all of these things that really, if you can just get one idea in there, that's all you need.
Would like to ask a little bit about the future, and, you know, what hasn't Fieldwork done that you would like to do, or how do you see the firm kind of evolving? Like, maybe one way to answer this is you could also talk a little bit about what you've got coming up that you can talk about. But you know, it would be entirely fine to just keep kind of working exactly as you are, because it's great. But you know, most creative people kind of want to continue either for creative reasons or for business reasons to kind of do that. And you know, related to that, I also wondered kind of, you know, if field work were to kind of ramp up and scale, you know, can that be done and still maintain the kind of level of craft that happens, like if you're taking on more projects or bigger projects? Like, are those kind of some issues you've thought about in terms of where you want to be, and can you still be you if you were doing it in a bigger way?
Yeah, I mean, it's we grapple with that every day. We've been fortunate. Most of our projects now and the furniture is sort of generated within house. We started really by collaborating actually with a lot of other architects and interior designers, and we're still, you know, very open to that, and that was a fun collaborative process. We've been able to, you know, get a little more selective with our project types. And as far as size, we actually have outgrown our space on Division, and sadly.
You mean I'm not going to be jogging past you every other day?
Well, maybe. We're moving into a larger space on Hawthorne. We were just kind of busting at the seams. But yeah, Tim, Tonia, and I all love being part of the design process, and I don't think we ever want to get too large where we're not involved in the day-to-day. We love sketching and getting into the 3D models and being really involved in that.
That's great.
As far as, yeah, project types.
As far as, project types, we actually have a couple of projects in the office right now that are of a much larger scale, where you were kind of asking, will we be able to kind of address this issue of craft? And it's a very large kind of architectural project, dining hall, overnight rooms, addition, kind of 12 to 14 cabins that would be also located on the property. So we'll be working on the architecture, the interiors, and we also then see ourselves then, you know, building custom furniture to help support these overnight rooms, the custom cabins, other elements. So we will be able to, you know, take that same approach on a much larger scale project, you know, from a 1,200 square foot project, you know, say it's a $20,000 project all the way to a $12 million project. So I think we're approaching that kind of with that same way we've been working on our projects to date.
And you have a winery coming up as well. Am I right about that?
Yeah, we have a winery in Dundee that we're working on for Day Wines, and she's kind of a up-and-coming vintner, and she's kind of been working around town, the Willamette Valley, various places, and now has her own facility. So That's actually under construction right now. And then we're designing kind of a tasting room and gardens that will be open in about a year from now.
It's really interesting. It seems also tied to your portfolio and what Fieldwork does, that you've, whether it's the tractor shed or this winery, that you've been able to get out of Portland and kind of work in that realm as well. And it seems like it's a time where more wineries are starting to look at serious design. We have Portland's most acclaimed architect, Brad Klopfel, in Allied Works, doing the Soka Blosser tasting room, or I think of one of my other favorite interior designers in town, Jessica Helgerson, has recently done a winery. So, does it sort of provide a different kind of opportunity for you to kind of get outside of Portland and work in a little bit less urban environment sometimes?
I think urban's great. I think it's funny. I don't know that we necessarily have a niche we're most comfortable in. I mean, I think obviously we're all big fans of the natural world and getting outside of the city, but there's a certain energy that happens when you're working with Nike where the value set is very different than something like a winery or this series of guest cabins that they want to last 100 years or several hundred years ideally. So it's really being able to ideally have a design process that those values can adapt to. I don't know if that
Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
I mean,
absolutely.
typically our work is regional, but we have a project in Los Angeles right now, a loft.
Oh, that's right.
That's under construction. We are able to fabricate a lot of the custom furniture for that and actually ship it down. We've done some work in New York as well. We love Oregon and the Pacific Northwest and feel like this is home. At the same time, we're very open to working in different regions and seeing what we can learn from that.
As to the inspiration question, I don't know that we necessarily have a firm we look at as a good model. I think we're all feeling like we pull inspiration from all kinds of places. I mean, obviously the natural world is wonderful, but Portland has just incredible talent across the entire bandwidth of jewelry makers, motorcycle builders. I mean, there's so much talent here that it's hard to feel like you can get too caught up in your own domain because there's just too much good stuff going on to keep aware of.
Yeah, what makes you so busy?
I would love to say it's just us. I think a lot of firms are very busy right now. In fact, I think one of the biggest limiting factors, Tonia and I are going to a project right after this because we've waited 4 months for the light fixtures to arrive. And, I think it's getting hard to find contractors and engineers, structural engineering. We were usually waiting on them several weeks. So I think part of it is just, in general, Portland's growing. The economy in general in the U.S. is booming. And then I think, we're starting to get our name out and been fortunate that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think activity attracts activity sometimes. So if you're busy, that makes you be out in the world and you bump into the next person.
And I feel like we're on this parallel path too with a lot of kind of younger companies, like Tender Loving Empire, for instance. I think we all sort of came to Portland about the same time, and where businesses are developing, and we're sort of moving forward together.
I mean, I don't think we've had someone say, I want you to make a copy of this. I mean, sometimes there's, in any project, a lot of times people have precedents. They're saying, I'm thinking of this, or I like that. So I don't think it's the right client for us if they want us to do a knockoff. Because number one, we would have no interest in it.
It does happen all the time.
Oh, it certainly does.
Hospitality happens constantly.
It certainly does, and I don't know, maybe you can make an argument that it's better to employ someone here in the U.S. than to have a imported knockoff made. That's just not the business we're in. I mean, we're designers. We're not here to sell more of something cheap. I mean, we want to give a good value for the work we're doing, but the work we're doing is not just knocking stuff off and getting it out the door as fast as possible.
But yeah, that has been part of the education that we have to go through for clients, because I think a lot of people feel like because it's designed and fabricated locally, that'll be cheaper. And that's just not always the case. I mean, we have a real love of crafts, so things tend to take us, not, I don't want to say a lot of time, but the time that it's needed to really produce a well-crafted piece of furniture. So that has involved some education, I think, with various clients.
To date, we've probably been very fortunate where we haven't had a particular client come to us and say, I want this or I want that. It's really been a process. And every project, I mean, yes, you may start to see a certain kind of uniqueness or quality or some detailing or a materiality that starts to happen through a lot of our projects, but I feel like every project is very unique to that client. So maybe we just haven't been around long enough for the volume of clients, but to date, we really haven't had to deal with that on any projects, like saying that, I want a project to look just like, the West Hills pool, even though I don't have a pool. Like, we haven't really had that approach to us.
Yeah, and then I think when that has come up, if we can sort of redirect the conversation to make it more about like experience and material qualities, then we can start to get away from the stylistic kind of aspects that maybe they're looking for.
Great. Well, why don't we wrap it up here? And of course, if those of you in the audience if anyone still had questions, I think we'll all be here for a little bit. But in the meantime, let's give a hearty round of applause to Tim and Tonia and Cornell. And thanks very much.